south. Whether you like roasted pecans, cinnamon pecans, pecan muffins, or my favorite, pecan pie, there's probably something you didn't know about pecan production. So follow me. I'm here with Jason Holland, farm manager for J&J Pecans, and today we're in Mr. Bub Way's orchard, and we've been harvesting. And I'm going to let Jason tell a little bit about the how do we harvest pecans.
Well, first of all, Mark, we have to shake the tree. It's all mechanical when we shake the tree, which is a very sensitive thing. When you first start harvesting and shaking a tree on desirable trees, you barely shake the tree. We call it tickling, because if you hit them too hard, there's still green nuts that come down. This process we're in right now is to find them on desirables, and when we grab a hold of that tree with that shaker, we shake everything. I mean, we make the ground rock and roll. This is a FMC pecan shaker, and how this piece of equipment works is everything's controlled inside, from steering to raising, lowering the boom, tilting the head up, down, side to side, and then you have a lever here which controls the grappling of the head, which puts pressure on the head. It's hydrostatic, forward and reverse. Also, when you go in forward and reverse, we have brushes in front and rear of the tires which sweep the nuts from the tire will not run over them. The hydraulic that does the brushes and all is also incorporated. It goes down this big boom right here, which is connected to the actual shaker head. Inside the head there are little motors and gears that are connected to weights, and when you engage the clamp to shake, the centrifugal force from that motor on that chain and weights slings it around in a circle, which gives you the vibration in which shakes the tree. You have to watch the pressure and all with this machine. If it grabs too hard to the tree, it will take the bark off of it, which is very hazardous to the tree, which can kill the tree. It lets insects and disease into them. It has big pads on the inside which can come out from shaking. You have to watch that, because metal on wood is not a good thing. It will take the bark off, which makes the tree susceptible to disease and insects. To transport this machine, it is raised up, and this whole head right here folds back and lays on this platform. And at that point in transport, from going from point A to point B, this is a rear steered machine. You have 2 tons up here, which makes it very, very difficult to drive this machine. Through a field, up and down the road, it makes it very difficult. But this is the first process that in harvesting that you have to do. And being the farmer, and you have to know the varieties of trees that you're going to shake first. Are the trees ready? The time to shake, and because if you shake the wrong trees, like in this orchard here, this is a desirable tree. As you can see, it is ready to shake. The Stewart tree over here, you can tell the foliage on it's still quite green compared to a desirable, and you can see the green nuts hanging up there. If we shook that tree, everything would come down and we would lose over half the nuts on that tree. Versus the desirables, they're ready. The brushes on the front and rear of the tire, they operate when it going forward, they spin counterclockwise, which brushes the nuts away from the tire. And in reverse, that one goes counterclockwise, which throws the nuts away from the tire so you're not damaging the nuts. After shaking, we have to come back with a sweeper and a blower, which the sweeper, what it does, the sweeper's in front, blower's in the back. We use a box sweeper. It goes down one side of the tree, it sweeps the nuts and all debris, leaves and everything to the right side of the tree, while the blower blows anything left to the left side of the tree. So when we get down to the end, we turn around and come back and we sweep to that right side of the tree, which is the opposite side we just came down. And then we go through and we cut them into windrows, which at that point we have people walk through our windrows, throwing large objects, limbs, any big debris which can clog up our harvesters or mess up any piece of equipment that we have. Once we do all that, we come with our harvester, which is also mechanical. We come through there, which is a very slow process, anywhere from a mile to a mile and a half. It takes quite a bit of time and you have to watch it real close. And what the harvester does, it picks up all the debris that are in the windrow. It has fans in it which light stuff, leaves, anything like that is blown out to each side. It has what's called a chain belt in there which drops all your rocks and small things like that. Then it goes through a vacuum which takes some more stuff out, and then it throws it into our hopper, which has a delimber. Any small limbs or anything left large that has been picked up is discharged out the back, and the nuts fall in our hopper. Our hopper on this one right here holds roughly 3,000 pounds. But it's a very long, drawn-out process.
To establish a new orchard, there's 4 factors that need to be thought about. First is soil type, then drainage and water table, and last topography. The soil type and drainage are very closely related to each other. A sandy soil is going to have much more drainage than a compacted clay soil, and that's what we want in a pecan orchard. We want sandy loamy soils at the top with a clay subsoil below that. And that's going to allow for more root growth, and it also will have some water holding potential down at the bottom. Now, tree roots don't grow very well when they're waterlogged. Lack of oxygen just will shut down root growth. So a well-drained soil is going to allow for much more root growth. And actually a pecan tree's root system can be twice as wide as the canopy of the tree itself. The third factor is water table. If the water table's up too high, that's going to have our soils be waterlogged more often, and that's going to also decrease root growth. So we want our water table to be no more than 6 feet below the soil surface. The fourth factor is topography. And in a low-lying area, we're getting less airflow through the trees, and that will allow for more disease pressure, and that's not a good thing for pecan production. And it will also, if it's not a flat surface, it could be hard to harvest the nuts once harvesting begins. There's 3 options when planting pecan trees. The first option is to plant from seed, and this is not recommended as it'll have a very, very high mortality rate. The second option is to plant seedlings, let them grow, and then graft them in a couple of years. This is a good option, but requires a lot of expertise and a lot of labor. And the third and best option is to plant already grafted trees. Now what that means is that 2 trees were grown in a nursery, one variety known for high pecan production and another variety known for a good root system, and those 2 trees were cut and taped together and eventually became one solid tree. And you can see here that this tree, the bark up here is a little bit different than the bark down here. And this just allows for a very, very competitive tree. It has a good root system, but also has the capability to produce a high amount of pecans. Orchard design is important for 3 reasons: pollination, ease of harvesting, and ease of thinning once trees become big enough and start crowding each other. Now, typical orchard design will be in a square, with trees being the corners of the square, 30 foot by 30 foot by 30 foot by 30 foot, and that will allow for, once the trees start to compete with each other, every other tree in the row can be thinned and cut down, and then we'll have 60 foot by 60 foot squares. Water is the #1 environmental factor that goes into pecan production. A tree needs about 60 inches of water per growing season, and here in Georgia we're not getting 60 inches of water in the summer and the fall. So we'll have to supplement rainfall with irrigation, and we have 3 forms of irrigation: sprinkler, drip, and micro irrigation. And our drip irrigation and micro irrigation are 2 more efficient forms. This right here is our drip irrigation system here, and usually we'll have them on both sides of the trees, and they just drip water constantly and keep that root zone fed with water. In young trees, drought stress is the leading cause of seedling mortality. And in older trees, during the months of July, August, and September, an average adult tree consumes about 360 gallons of water per day. Now, the first 2 weeks of September are critically important for water. That's when our pecans are starting to set their weight. So having adequate water in the first 2 weeks of September is vitally important to producing a high yield. Just like every other crop, nitrogen is the most limiting factor when it comes to fertility. Nitrogen helps in a healthy, strong tree as well as nut production. And the University of Georgia recommends that for every 100 pounds of expected yield, we need to apply 10 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Potash is also very important for nut production, and potash and nitrogen need to be in a specific ratio. We can have potash that's low but not necessarily deficient, but when we have excess nitrogen, the tree will show deficiencies in potash. One micronutrient that is very important is zinc. Zinc helps in not only nut production, but shoot and leaf elongation, so a deficiency in zinc can really hurt pecan production. So just like every other crop, pecan growers have to watch out for insects. 2 of the more important insects that we look out for are case borer moths and aphids. Case borer moths are moths with larvae that are caterpillars, and these caterpillars overwinter in cocoons and emerge in early spring. Once they emerge, they feed on the nutlets, causing the nutlets to abort and hence losing a pecan. We search for these case borer moths using pheromone traps. These pheromone traps will be hung in the orchard, and inside the trap is a small rubber piece that contains the pheromone. The pheromone attracts the males, and once they get inside, they stick to the inside. It's got a sticky substance on it. So what we do is we look inside these traps and we count how many numbers of case borer moths that we find. If we get up to a certain percentage or a threshold, that means it's time for us to consider spraying the orchard to not lose potential yield. If we're under that threshold, we may get a little bit of damage, but it might not be enough worth the spray. So with the aphids, we have black pecan aphids and yellow pecan aphids. Both of these species suck sap from the foliage and secrete a honeydew. This honeydew is actually the excretia from the aphids, and is what most people see when we park up under a pecan tree and we get the sticky stuff on our trucks. This honeydew can form a black mold or a black residue that covers the leaves in the trunk, and if you get enough of that black mold on your leaves, you're going to reduce photosynthesis, and when you reduce photosynthesis, of course, you're going to reduce yields. So it's important to spray for pecan aphids if you have them, to keep the yields as high as you can. I'm here with R.G. Lamar, partner and manager of Lamar Pecan Company, and R.G. is going to take us on a tour of his warehouse.
Okay, So we bring the wagons off the dryer and put them on the platform here, which has a hydraulic lift. It lifts the whole wagon up and dumps it into the pit. And then we have an elevator that pulls the nuts out of the pit. The nuts go up the elevator through a fan that pulls air to pull leaves out of the nuts. And then they fall onto that funny looking chain with the hexagon holes in it. That chain lets sticks or carries sticks out of the nuts and lets the nuts fall through. And then it goes into what we call the air leg. Carried up to fall through this chamber. The air leg is using a squirrel cage fan to blow air up through the nuts while the nuts are falling down. So it removes any nuts that are hollow, lighter nuts or smaller nuts, things like that we don't want in the mix. Then they come out onto this tall elevator that carries them into what we call the shuck reel, which is another squirrel cage. It's not a fan, but it's just a squirrel cage with different size bars that separate nuts that still have shucks on them from the nuts that have come out of the shucks the way they're supposed to. And then after the shuck reel, it goes into these hoppers. Then from the rock remover, they go on to this belt, or this elevator, which goes up. We have two aspirators. We used to use these aspirators to pull out B grade nuts before the A grade went to the inspection table, but we bought a new B grade aspirator that I'll show you in a minute. So we use these just to get more of the pops or the hollow nuts out. Basically the same thing the air leg does, but they just do a better, more thorough job. From here, it goes inside the plant to the inspection table. When the nuts come in from the aspirators, they first go through a new machine that we bought this year that's made by Inspection Masters, and it uses electronic eyes to determine whether the nut is a good nut or a bad nut, and it uses 4 different things to determine that. So it uses infrared, which allows it to determine whether the shuck is still on the shell because it's got a spongier texture. And then it uses color, so sometimes the shucks are still green and they look kind of shiny similar to the shell, so the infrared wouldn't get that, but it gets that by color. And then also uses shape and size to help get things like sticks and small rocks out that the other equipment may have missed. So it's a pretty neat way that our industry has used technology. But technology still doesn't get everything, so we have people standing here as the nuts go by on the inspection table to pull out whatever the machine might have missed. Then when it comes off the inspection table, it goes through the new aspirator that we bought to pull out B grades, which has a variable speed motor, so we can dial it in based on the size of the nuts that we're running through the plant on that lot. It uses air jets to shoot out the nuts that it doesn't like. So it uses a computer. It takes a picture as it's falling through, and then it just calculates the time it would take from where it took the picture to where the air jet is, and it's able to throw out exact nuts with air jets. Amazing. So these plastic tubes are where the compressed air comes through, and there's a whole row of holes here that it uses to shoot out the nuts. The white part that you see is the background that it looks at the nut on, and then on the right side you see a row of lights, and it looks like half of them are on and half of them are off, but the ones that are off are actually just the infrared lights. And then there's a mirror in the machine. The camera is actually, you can't see it now, but it looks through the window into a mirror, and then it looks at the nuts through a mirror. And this is where, you know, the 2 or 3 inches there between the white background and the air spout is what it has to compute to know what to shoot out. So. I'll just take a handful of these nuts out of the B grade bag, and you can see I'll just crack them open. It's pretty hollow. There's a little bit of meat in there, but not something you want to buy at the grocery store to put in your pecan pie. So these will go to a commercial sheller and they'll chop them up. Ones like this they'll just throw out completely, but there are nuts in here that still have valuable meat in them. They'll chop those up and use them in the piece market for cereal or butter pecan ice cream, pecan sandies, things like that. After the B grades are pulled out, it goes up a high elevator to the sizer, where we separate it into two different sizes. It's measured in 1/16 of an inch. So anything that's 14/16 of an inch wide or larger come through the sizer and fall out into the second bag. Anything smaller than that falls through the sizer into the first bag. And that's really important because of the market that we're in now. Anything larger than 14/16 is suitable for the Asian market, which is a lot better price than the domestic market. So we pull those out of every lot, send them to China. The other stuff mostly we sell domestically. The Asian market likes bigger nuts because they use them as a snack food. So they're not shelling any of the stuff that we send to them, or almost any of it. They crack the shell, soak it in a flavored brine, and then roast it in the shell. So they eat pecans similar to the way we eat pistachios, as an in-shell snack food. So this is our, well, we have two warehouses, but this is our storage at the cleaning plant. So most of what stays here is for the domestic commercial grade shellers. We have another warehouse in Hawkinsville where we take the 14/16 nuts and we have to rebag them into 50-pound bags for the Asian market. And then we load containers there, which are intermodal containers, and they go on ocean vessels for about a 36-day journey to Hong Kong. We've devised a way, we used to use pallets for these bags, but we devised a way that the forklift can pick up the bag by the loops. So we used to have to weigh every pallet to get a tear weight as we were loading trucks, but it cut out a lot of time for us. The bags all weigh the same thing, so we know exactly what the tear weight is for each bag, and the loops stand up pretty good on their own. So, and our forklift driver's been doing this for a couple of years, so he's really good at it. And he's able to load everything just by the loops. All right, we're at the other warehouse where we do a lot of the shipping to China, and we also buy nuts here from the public. So you can see Mr. Jack Eccles here negotiating with a patron, and I'm sure he'll get the best prices in this area because we do offer the best prices. We also do cracking for the public for 40 cents a pound. You can get a picture here of the nuts that we've cracked for someone. And we'll go back to the back and I'll show you where we bag for China. This is the equipment that we use to repackage into 50-pound bags. So the first part here is a chain hoist that lifts the big 2,200-pound bags that you saw at the cleaning plant and puts them in this elevator and puts them in the hopper there. The white thing that you see hanging down from the hopper gets us within a half pound of 50 pounds. So we have some check scales that you see sitting on the floor there, where I'll have a guy putting in a nut or taking out a nut or two to get it exactly 50 pounds. And then it comes down this little conveyor and you see the sewing machine hanging right there. It's on a roller so he can move up and down the conveyor, and he uses that to close the 50-pound bags. And then normally we'll have a pallet sitting on the floor and they'll stack about 30 bags per pallet, and then we'll put them in the warehouse to keep them until the
After the B grades are pulled out, it goes up.
Have to put them in 50-pound bags to the sizer. Most of the customers in China require that, where we separate it into two different sizes. It's measured in 1/16 of an inch.
A lot of the nuts are sold to brokers in Hong Kong,
14/16 of an inch wide or larger
into smaller
come
lots
through the sizer and fall out into the second bag.
And then the second reason is a lot of the processors in mainland China are just small family.
And that's really important because of the market only do
that we're in
a
now,
container or less than a container of pecans per
larger
year
than 14
in their
16ths
factory,
is
and they don't have
suitable for the
forklifts or
Asian
anything like
market,
that. So it's all
which
hand
is
labor.
a lot better
So if we send them a
price
2,000
than
pound
the
bag,
domestic
they can
market.
pick it up.
So
we have
pull
to put it in
those out
smaller
of
bags.
every lot, send them to China. The other stuff mostly we sell domestically.
Okay. So next time you're eating pecans, remember how much hard work went into growing these delicious snacks. They don't just grow on their own, they take a lot of maintenance. I'm Mark Freeman, University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Agent in Pulaski County. And now that pecans are harvested and packaged, it's time for a county agent's hibernation. I'll see you again in the spring. Stop staring at my pie. Everybody wants to know, do you say pecan or pecan?
Being from the south, I say pecan. I was told a few years back from an old gentleman the word pecan came about if you worked in them long enough, they're a pain in your behind, and that's where the word pecan came from. Pain in the behind.
How do you say pecan?
Well, it depends on if you're buying or selling them. If you're selling them, I say pecans, because that's cheaper. If I'm selling them, I say pecans.
I'm Allison Goodman, director and producer of this show, Room for Growth. And as a girl raised in the South, I say it's pecan.